Hello, welcome to the cabin. I'm happy you can join me tonight as I read some more classic children's tales by the fireside. Come on in, make yourself at home. There's a cozy chair right over there. I'm gonna go ahead and add some more wood to this fire, get it going again. Look like it was starting to die down. So while I'm doing that, come on and make yourself comfortable, and we'll begin in just a few moments.
There's a town called Don't You Worry, on the banks of River Smile, where they cheer up and be happy, blossom sweetly all the while, where the never grumble flower blooms beside the fragrant try, and the ne'er give up and patience point their faces to the sky. In the valley of contentment, in the province of I will, you will find this lovely city at the foot of No Fret Hill. There are thoroughfares delightful in this very charming town, and on every hand are shade trees named the very seldom frown. Rustic benches quite enticing, you'll find scattered here and there, and to each a vine is clinging, called the frequent earnest prayer. Everybody there is happy and is singing all the while, in the town of Don't You Worry, on the banks of River Smile.
Okay, now that we're all settled in, we're going to start with The Little Rabbit Who Wanted Red Wings. Once upon a time, there was a little white rabbit with 2 beautiful long pink ears and 2 bright red eyes and 4 soft little feet. Such a pretty little white rabbit, but he wasn't happy. Just think, this little white rabbit wanted to be somebody else instead of the nice little rabbit that he was. When Mr. Bushytail, the gray squirrel, went by, the little white rabbit would say to his mammy, "Oh, mammy, I wish I had a long gray tail like Mr. Bushytail's." And when Mr. Porcupine went by, the little white rabbit would say to his mammy, "Oh, mammy, I wish I had a back full of bristles like Mr. Porcupine's." And when Miss Puddle Duck went by, in her 2 little red rubbers, the little white rabbit would say, "Oh, mammy, I wish I had a pair of those red rubbers like Miss Puddle Duck's." So he went on wishing until his mammy was clean tired out with his wishing, and old Mr. Groundhog heard him one day. Old Mr. Groundhog is very wise, so he said to the little white rabbit, "Why don't you go down to the wishing pond, and if you look in the water at yourself and turn around 3 times in a circle, you'll get your wish." Nice. What would I wish for in that wishing well? What would you wish for if you had a wishing well like that? Something to think about, isn't it? So the little white rabbit trotted off, all alone by himself, through the woods until he came to the little pool of green water lying in a low tree stump. And that was the wishing pond. There was a little bird, all red, sitting on the edge of the wishing pond to get a drink. And as soon as the little white rabbit saw him, he began to wish again. "Oh, I wish I had a pair of those little red wings," he said. Just then he looked into the wishing pond and he saw his little white face. Then he turned around 3 times and something happened. He began to have a queer feeling in his shoulders, like that he felt in his mouth when he was cutting his teeth. It was his wings coming through. So he sat all day in the woods by the wishing pond, waiting for them to grow. And by, when it was almost sundown, he started home to see his mammy and show her, because he had a beautiful pair of long, trailing red wings. By the time he reached home, it was getting dark, and when he went into the hole at the foot of the big tree where he lived, his mammy didn't know him. No, she really and truly did not know him, because, you see, she had never seen a rabbit with red wings in all her life. And so the little white rabbit had to go out again, because his mammy wouldn't let him get into his own bed. He had to go out and look for some place to sleep all night. He went and went until he came to Mr. Bushytail's house, and he rapped on the door and said, "Please, kind Mr. Bushytail, may I sleep in your house all night?" But Mr. Bushytail opened his door a crack, and then he slammed it tight again. You see, he had never seen a rabbit with red wings in all his life. So the little white rabbit went on and went on until he came to Miss Puddle Duck's nest, down by the marsh, and he said, "Please, kind Miss Puddle Duck, may I sleep in your nest all night?" But Miss Puddle Duck poked her head out of her nest just a little way, and then she shut her eyes and stretched her wings out so far that she covered her whole nest. You see, she has never seen a rabbit with red wings in all her life. So the little white rabbit went and went until he came to old Mr. Groundhog's hole. And old Mr. Groundhog had let him sleep with him all night, but the hole had beech nuts spread all over it. Old Mr. Groundhog would like them to sleep on, but they hurt the little white rabbit's feet. They made him very uncomfortable before morning. When it came morning, the little white rabbit decided to try his wings and fly a little. So he climbed up on a hill and spread his wings and sailed off. But he landed in a low bush all full of prickles, and his 4 feet got mixed up with the twigs, and he couldn't get down. "Mammy, Mammy, Mammy, come and help me," he called. His mammy didn't hear him, but old Mr. Groundhog did, and he came and helped the little white rabbit out of the prickly bush. "Don't you want your red wings?" Mr. Groundhog asked. "No, no," said the little white rabbit. "Well," said the old groundhog, "why don't you go down to the wishing pond and wish them off again?" So the little white rabbit went down to the wishing pond, and he saw his face in it. Then he turned around 3 times, and sure enough, his red wings were gone. Then he went home to his mammy, who knew him right away, and was so glad to see him, and he never wished to be something different from what he really was again. That's like when you have friends, close friends, and you're having a good time with them and you appreciate their company. But you see somebody that looks a little cooler. You say, "Wow, that person looks really cool. I want to be more like that person." So you start copying that person and start acting more like that other person. And pretty soon your friends know that you're different. Well, the things they liked about you aren't there anymore because you're acting like somebody else. So your friends that you used to have come around and hang out with you aren't coming around anymore. So it's nice to stay just the way you are. Now I'm going to read about some dancing monkeys, adapted from Aesop. Once upon a time, a prince had some monkeys. They were very bright, funny little monkeys, and so he taught them to dance, heel-toe, forward and back. Soon they were able to dance for all the world like men and women. So the prince gave the monkeys fine clothes, and he put them up on the stage to dance for all his friends. Night after night, they danced just like real people. By and by, those who watched them began to say to each other, "Well, well, these must be men. We thought at first they were monkeys, but surely they must be men." And the monkeys, too, began to think they were part of a tribe of men and to hold their heads very high. "We're just as good as men," they said to one another. But one day, a mischievous boy thought up a little trick. He threw some nuts on the stage as the monkeys were lined up to dance. Suddenly, at sight of the nuts, those monkeys forgot they were dancers. They forgot they had all called themselves men. Breaking the line of their dance, they thought only of scrambling for nuts. Fighting with one another, they kicked and bit and chattered, and none of them was willing that any other monkey should get a single nut. That was a tussle for you. They tore all the clothes off each other. And now what a how do you do? As they stood there without any clothes, everyone who was watching could see that they were not really men. They were nothing at all but monkeys. The people roared with laughter, while an old man cried from the crowd, "He who thinks himself a man will have to act like a man. Squabbling, you show yourselves monkeys. Fighting, you show yourselves beasts." We all had times of losing control of our actions in our life. Fighting with a toy or not wanting to share, or fighting over the last cookie or the last piece of candy. This is an Indian tale called Shingvis. I'm probably going to be pronouncing some of this wrong, so you have to give me some bray, so to speak. In his lodge, on the shores of Lake Huron, lived little brown duck Shingvis. When the fierce north wind swept down from the glittering land of snow, 4 great logs for firewood had little brown duck Shingvis. Brave and cheery was Shingvis. No matter how the north wind raged, he waddled out across the ice and found what food he needed. Pulling up the frozen rushes that grew up in his little pond, he dived down through the holes they left and got his fish for supper. Then away to his lodge he went, dragging a string of fish behind him. By his blazing fire, he cooked his fish for supper and made himself warm and cozy. Kind of like it is in here, warm and cozy. At last, the north wind shrieked, "Woo! Who dares brave Big Chief North Wind? All other creatures fear him. Only Brown Duck, Shingabis treats Big Chief North Wind as if he were a squaw breeze. So the North Wind sent out cold, icy blasts. They made high drifts of snow, so not a bird or beast dared venture forth, save Shingabis. Shingabis still went out, just as he had before, and paid no heed to the weather. He got his fish every day, cooked his supper every night, and warmed himself by the fire. Ah, raged Big Chief North Wind, little brown duck Shingabis cares not for snow or ice. North Wind will freeze his hole so he can get no food, then Big Chief will conquer him. So the North Wind froze the hole where the little brown duck fished and heaped his pond with snow. But when Shingabis found his holes closed so he could not reach the water, he did not even murmur. He just went cheerfully on till he found another pond on which there was no snow. Then he pulled up the rushes, where he made new holes for himself, through which he could do his fishing. Brown duck shall know who is chief, the North Wind howled in anger. For days and days and days he followed the little brown duck. He froze up his holes in the ice and covered his ponds with snow. But Shingabis walked forth fearlessly, just as he had before. He always got a few fish before each hole was frozen, and he still went cheerily home every night, dragging his fish behind him. The North Wind now roared in fury. Big Chief will go to the lodge of little brown duck Shingabis. Big Chief will blow in his door, sit down by his side, and breathe icy breaths till he freezes. Now Shingabis, at that moment, had just eaten his supper, and he was sitting warming his little wet feet by the blaze of his bright, burning fire. Carefully holding his breath, so Shingabis could not hear him, quietly, very quietly, the North Wind crept up to the lodge, but Shingabis felt the icy cold come in through the cracks of the door. I know who's there, he thought, and he began to sing sturdily. Ka'anij, bien, banin, Oki, Kawane. And the North Wind knew what he was saying. North Wind, fierce in feature, you are still my fellow creature. Blow your worst, you can't freeze me. I fear you not, and so I'll be free. Then the North Wind was raging, but he kept his voice to a whisper. He said, Big Chief will freeze him. So the North Wind crept under the door. He slipped up behind the little Shingabis and sat down by the fire. Now Shingabis knew he was there, but he paid no heed at all. He kept on singing louder. Ka'anij, bien. Big Chief will stay till he freezes, whistled the fierce North Wind, and he breathed his iciest breath. But at that moment, Shingabis leaned over and stirred his fire. The North Wind's frosty hair began all at once to drip. His icy face started to drip. The tears ran down his cheeks. The mighty puff of his breath grew fainter and fainter and fainter. The Shingabis still sat warming his little webbed feet by the blaze, and he still continued to sing. North Wind, fierce in feature, you are still my fellow creature. At length, North Wind gave a shriek. Big Chief is melting, he cried, and he rushed headlong through the doorway and flung himself on a snowbank. Strange little brown duck Shingabis, he murmured weakly to himself. Big Chief North Wind can't starve him, can't freeze him, can't make him afraid. Ugh! North Wind will let him alone. The Great Spirit is within him. Only times things bother us is when we let them bother us. Somebody told me one time there's no problems unless we recognize it as a problem. If we don't see it as a problem, it can't be a problem. And a lot of times, if you wait long enough, it's not really a problem. It's just something that that just happened, and it'll go away pretty quickly. But we like to dwell on things that we don't like that go wrong. So they become more and more important. So they become bigger and bigger in our lives. So this duck, on the other hand, wasn't going to get bothered by the wind or the cold, or he had to walk so much further every time to get his fish, and that he had to remake holes every time that he had to get his fish, and they kept getting colder and colder. He just kept being cheerful, and he beat the cold. So cold didn't bother him anymore. It's always good to just go through life, taking life as it is, and being cheerful along the way. It'll help out. Sounds like there's a bird outside the window, chirping. Can you hear it? Seems kind of early in the season for birds to be coming around. It's perfect timing though, because I'm about ready to read how the finch got her colors. Once upon a time, all the birds were gray. They had no color at all. Then the great bird, who ruled over them, called them all together. He showed them the rainbow up in the sky, shimmering with red, yellow, green, blue, and violet. And he told them that he meant to give each of them one of those splendid colors. At once they began pushing and shoving and crowding about him, kind of like the monkeys. "Let me have first choice. I'll take green," screeched the parrot. "Give me blue. I want blue," piped the bluebird. "I'll take yellow," cried the canary. But during all this clamor, one little bird sat quietly and waited her turn to speak. That was the finch. "Now you each have a splendid color," said the great bird, "and it's well that you have, for every single color is gone." But just at that moment, the great big bird spied the little finch. "Come here, little finch," he cried. "Why have you asked for nothing?" "I was waiting my turn," said the finch. "But now all the colors are gone," said the great bird. "Dear, dear, dearie," sighed the finch. "Must I then always be gray?" Suddenly the great bird called all the other birds back, just as they were about to fly away in their splendid colors. "Be always gray," he cried, "because you would not push and shove, because you would not screech what you wanted ahead of all the rest? No, indeed, you shall not." Then he made all the other birds pass in order before him. From each he took a bit of color. From the cardinal, a bit of red. From the bluebird, a bit of blue. From the parrot, a bit of green. From the canary, a bit of yellow. From the grackle, a bit of purple. And he gave all these bits of colors to the little finch. Then lo and behold, the little finch shone all the tints of the rainbow. Not one color alone was hers, but all melting beautifully into each other. Thus it came about that the prettiest bird of the air was the little wee finch who waited her turn. Sometimes it's better to wait. Sometimes we want something so bad, and they were all sad because we can't get it. And then something better comes along right around the corner. And it's like, oh, I'm so glad that I didn't get that the first time because this is so much better. So if we're just patient and kind, we'll get what we want eventually. It might not be the minute you want it, but if you wait patiently, you'll eventually get what you want. It's just the way it works, like the finch. These are my birds here. This one has a little bit of all the colors in it there. It's hard for you to see, I'm sure, but it's got orange and green and some yellow, a little bit of blue tinting going on there. And then I have this bird, which is a blue and white bird. We don't have names yet. My granddaughter, Rosalie, she loves naming things, so I'll ask her to name those birds, and then the next time we come to the cabin, we'll share the names with you. This little bird here is orange and blue, soft little bird. Yeah. My mother made that. It's made out of wool. Amazing. And then we have, of course, if you can see down there, that's the eagle. That would be the great bird. So maybe we'll have names for the eagle and the blue and orange bird too. Since I was showing you the birds and introducing you to some of the birds, here is the great north wind, and this is Shingibus. So I can show you those as well. Okay, now we're going to be reading about the sheep and the pig that made a home. I don't really have any sheep and pigs around here right now where I would introduce you to them, but I don't have a sheep or a pig in here. So I have to get one. Set those down here. Okay. The sheep and the pig that made a home. Once upon a time, there was a sheep, and he started out into the world to build himself a home. First, he went to the pig and he said, "There's nothing like having a home of your own. If you are of my way of thinking, we will go into the woods and build a house and live by ourselves." Yes, the pig was quite willing. "It's nice to be in good company," said he, and off they started. When they had got a bit on the way, they met a goose. "Good day, my good people. Where are you off to?" said the goose. "Good day," answered the sheep. "We're off to the woods to build a house and live by ourselves." "Why shouldn't I join you?" said the goose. "No house can be built by gobbling and squawking," said the pig. "What can you do to help build a house?" "I can pluck moss and stuff it into holes between the logs so the house will stay warm and cozy," said the goose. "Very well, you may come along then," said the sheep and the pig. When they had gone a bit further, they met a hare. "Good day, my good people," said the hare. "Where are you going today?" "Good day," answered the sheep. "We're off to the woods to build a house and live by ourselves." "I've got a good mind to go with you," said the hare. "But what can you do to help us build?" said the pig. "Nothing at all, I should say." "There is always something for willing hands to do in this world," said the hare. "I have sharp teeth to gnaw pegs with." and I have paws to knock them into the walls. So I'll do very well as a carpenter." "Well, you may come along with us then," said the sheep, the pig, and the goose. When they had gone a bit further, they met a rooster. "Good day, my people," said the rooster. "Where are you all going today?" "Good day," said the sheep. "We're off to the woods to build a house and live by ourselves." "Well, it is better to have your own roost than to sit on the neighbor's roost and crow," said the rooster. "I should like to go to the woods and build a house with you." "Flapping and crowing is fine for noise, but it won't build a house," said the pig. "How can you help us build?" "It is not well to live in a house where there is neither a dog nor a rooster to awaken you in the morning," said the rooster. "I rise very early and can awaken you all with my crowing." "Early to rise makes one happy and wealthy and wise," said the pig, who found it very hard to wake up in the morning. "Let the rooster come along then." So they all set off to the woods and built the house. The pig cut down the trees and the sheep dragged them home. The hare was the carpenter and gnawed pegs and hammered them into the walls and roof. The goose plucked moss and stuffed it into the little holes between the logs. The rooster crew and took care they did not oversleep themselves in the mornings. And when the house was finished, they all lived happily ever after. It's pleasant to travel both east and west, but home is, after all, the best, is what they would say. There is always something that somebody can do as long as they're doing something. I've had people try to help me out before, and all they did was waste my time. I had to ask them to please leave because instead of helping, they were actually slowing me down. So you don't want to be that person. There's always something you can do. If I have to move a pile of rocks from here over to there, and all you can do all day is move one rock the whole time, then it's one less rock I have to move. So you're being very helpful as long as you're working the whole time. But moving the rock a little, talking, "Look at this, look at that, look what I'm doing." Move the rock a little bit more. "Hey, check me out." Move a little bit more, and all you're doing is wasting what kind of time I have to get the job done. So it's always good. As long as you keep working, then you'll be worth having around. This is Nurse's Song by William Blake. Figured we should get a poem in here since we haven't had any poems today. When the voices of children are heard on the green and laughing is heard on the hill, my heart is at rest within my breast and everything else is still. Then come home, my children, the sun is gone down and the dews of the night arise. Come, come, leave off play, and let us away till the morning appears again in the skies. No, no, let us play, for it is yet day, and we cannot go to sleep. Besides, in the sky, the little birds fly, and the hills are all covered with sheep. Well, well, go and play till the night fades away, and then go home to bed. The little ones leaped and shouted and laughed, and all the hills echoed. Well, before cell phones and computers, when we would play outside, we would have to we'd have to come in when the street lights came on. They came on at the same time, usually every night in the summer. So just before it got really dark, they would come on, and then whatever we were doing, we'd have to race home. And it's like, sure, there's so many people that had to do that. I hear it from so many people today when we talk that they use the street lights as a time to come home. So make sure you're back when the street lights come on. Okay, Mom. And we'd be playing football or baseball or tag or something, and just having a good old time. And then, pink, those lights come on, and it was like, all right, guys, we got to go. And everybody had the same rules, so it doesn't matter who you were with. Then lights came on, we all just got scattered all our different ways. Everybody just ran home, and until the next day we could play again together. But those are good memories. So this reminds me of this William Blake poem. Trying to squeeze every last minute out of the night they can get out of it. Should have enough time for a short little story. This is called Building the Bridge. In the forest, stood a big pine tree. Green and shaggy in the forest stood a big pine tree. Men came with their axes, bang, 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 with their axes. They cut the pine tree down. They took a saw and they sawed it. Zim, zim, zip. They sawed it. They sawed it into planks. They took the planks and they laid them. They laid them one by one across the shining river. They nailed the planks with hammers. Rap, tap, tap. With hammers, they nailed the boards down fast. And so they made a bridge. They made a great big bridge across the shining river. And who will go across that bridge? All who come to the bridge will cross to the other side. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you for joining me again, and I hope you all have a good night's sleep.
They'll say to their children through stories that bad things aren't always as they seem. So come now, my love, and lay down your head. May you find sweet dreams in fairy trees. Sweet dreams in fairy trees.